Cool. Recording. There we go. All right. Good to be back. We haven't done this in a while.
Yeah.
Yeah, but
Too busy out and about observing.
too busy out and about. But we, well, I mean, I don't have any plans to leave Philly anytime soon. I've been a little too mobile, I think. I feel bad traveling during a pandemic.
Yeah.
But you know, I've been doing pretty isolated stuff. But anyway, I'm like staying put for a while. So
Good plan.
Yeah, we'll get into a good schedule.
I'd love to get out of the city a little bit, but
yeah,
That's
well, you
not
were at the
it
coast,
here.
right? That was.
I was at the coast. It was very
Yeah.
beautiful. Snarfed a lot of oysters.
Yeah, you could always get out more though.
Yeah, totally. I think. Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Definitely.
How are things in Portland?
It's pretty cool.
Yeah, the usual. I mean, of course, like everyone, I feel like there's such a spectacle going on in Portland right now, but I'm sure that's just like so far away
Yeah.
from.
No, I mean totally. I mean we also missed streaming sort of the moment where like Portland was really in the national eye.
Yeah, yeah, but it's still going on, right? I mean,
Yeah. I mean, we just had a bit, well, but like the federal troops have left. I think.
gotcha,
The
gotcha,
DHS
gotcha.
people are gone. I believe
Hmm.
there's still like all sorts of craziness happening. There's a big like biker gang, sort of Proud Boy type rally or something this weekend.
Oh shit.
There's some violence involved, but no, that's
Delightful.
not anything. Yeah, nothing new.
Damn, the Proud Boys. I feel like. Oh
I don't
my
think
god,
they were
this
the
shit
Proud Boys,
feels
don't get me
retro
wrong.
at this point.
I know. We have had some big Proud Boy incidents up here.
Yeah.
I know. Yeah, a bar had to close because there was sort of like a Proud Boy rally there. Well, yeah, this is where the person that we both know sort of
Gotcha.
came to like widespread attention. I don't want to mention
Yes.
their name.
Yeah. Of course. That was something. It is like, again,
yeah,
this
the
stuff
cider
happens all the
riots.
time. Yeah, but I mean, it's just. It was interesting because I feel like this is kind of a new paradigm of just like doxing as activism, and just like
Totally.
people
Yeah.
on whatever your chosen side is, your go-to tactic is to just kind of like ridicule and shame online in whatever way you can.
Yeah, well, yeah. I mean, this has been sort of like the rights tactic for a long time, like the 4chan tactic.
Yeah,
It used to
true.
go on, like,
Yeah. I mean,
Used
docs
to go on
like
poll back in like 2016, and they'd be like going to protests and like doxing people and stuff.
yeah. Even the
it's just
term.
now- Well, yeah. I mean, now I think it's just a lot more mainstream to sort of name and shame on both sides.
Yeah.
Fairly or unfairly.
Yeah.
I think
yeah.
usually unfairly.
Yeah, it's definitely a wild phenomenon. I think it's the conclusion I'm sure a lot of people are coming to is just like check out completely. Like, I don't know. I
Yeah.
feel like it could definitely. It's probably. I'm sure there will be more of this happening, but I'm sure it spurned a lot of just like people just ditching social media completely, making that final push.
Yeah, I'm close. I'm pretty close to getting my shit offline.
Yeah, I know. It really is the thing, and this is what we've been talking about, of the unfortunate just like intersection of your digital self and your physical self, and that now you have to have like it's this naming and shaming and doxing and all of that is made possible because people have their real names online and because people have lots of identifying information online. It's a radical change from, I think, our shared reference point of like an older internet when things were heavily anonymous.
Yeah, totally,
And
absolutely.
the internet was kind of just like a totally separate space from the real world, and now it's just like they're just totally overlapping in this really strange way.
Yeah, and this is what we've sort of been talking about in our first couple of streams. Talking mostly about sort of particularly like this history through cartooning, but I guess just has now been accelerated of sort of like human technological hybrids, like these like digital or like virtual or fake fictional shapes that are sort of modeled or based on human bodies.
Yeah.
I think it's been like the touchstone for all of this, right?
Yeah. We started with rotoscoping and just the purely artistic applications. And now I think we're kind of getting to, in the contemporary moment, where you go from these techniques, again, like rotoscoping, like different ways of taking human movement and just things that are distinctly human, things that are, that's the uncanniness, right? When something does kind of like make a gesture towards the actual human. And then you get to the point now where you're kind of supplanting actual humans.
Yeah,
which is the problem area for sure.
Yes,
right?
that's where we are today. Where we are today is basically deepfakes. Is the topic of the day, as we've laid it out very carefully.
Oh yeah.
But yeah, I mean, basically, like last time where we left off is basically like these sort of like Japanese kind of entertainment technologies was sort of the terminus point for those talks, like. Vocaloid, like Hatsune Miku.
VTubers.
Yeah, VTubers. And these sort of like turns of the human body towards like the commercial in like this sort of like virtualized space. Which is like deeply, and we talked about this, like deeply uncanny, but not necessarily like, or I think to like normal people, not necessarily like threatening, like does not, like clearly sort of like remains outside the bounds of real life, where I think like the next logical place to take this like discussion is deep faking, where those same technologies, or not those same technologies, but sort of similar related technologies are being used to sort of really blur this gap between reality and the digital space.
Yeah, and for potentially nefarious purposes.
Yeah, and that's kind of the thing. I think that's like why we both want to talk about it, is because we're both kind of conspiracy nuts.
A little bit. This
comes up a lot in like conspiracy spaces and has for a while.
Yeah.
Like sort of since deep faking made the news back in like, what was it, like 2017 was like really when it came to widespread attention.
Yeah, it's been a while. I feel like with most things, definitely the original like media furor around it was about pornography.
Right, and this is sort of where like deep faking has broken through. Is like sort of inserting, I mean, I guess usually celebrities, but I'm sure less famously like just normal people into pornographic scenes. Sort of like, do we need to give a rundown of what deep faking technology is, or like what deep faking is? I feel like it's everyone kind of knows at this point, I think.
And that's the weird thing too, is that like whatever, it's not a single uniform technology, right? It's not a uniform process, and it's not a uniform application. And yet everyone kind of has this vague idea of what it is. Even though I don't think there is like, I think there's probably like with VTubing and like with just any of this like virtual, like augmented reality stuff, there's like a million different approaches. But it all boils down to a kind of uncanny blurring of the distinction between real life and then a simulated version of real life that is like truly simulated. It goes beyond just the kind of like philosophical idea of simulation, where it all resides in like your brain and perception, and it's like this is bits, this is like ones and zeros, this is pixels, this is
right, yeah, but
3D generated shapes, and it's being like overlaid on top of reality.
Yeah, exactly. No, it's a virtual person. It's like someone's face being laid over someone else's face, or someone's face being generated sort of whole cloth. Yeah.
With movements like though, with three dimensionality, and it looks. I mean, it still is fairly uncanny. Hopefully, like that's the one hope, basically. That I feel like when you read about it, it's like, well, it's not good enough yet that it's unmistakable from a real human.
Well, yeah, this is like the big question of deep faking. I think the reason it's like so interesting to conspiracy circles, and like just interesting in general, is that like 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 where did this technology come from? What's its application? Like what is sort of like the end to this technology? Like something like we were talking about, obviously, like Kazuna Eye or like Project Melody, like these VTubers, like the end product is like you have a stream and you get donations and you make money that way. And that's why you like, and you want the human body there to like add this like element of realness or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
Like with deep faking, like what is the end product is sort of like the thing that I think is so fascinating about this is that we there. And I guess this is sort of like takes us into like what I guess are like the reading that you and I did for today, but sort of like the theoretical framework that we're interested in. Is the fact that it's looming. It's like this looming sort of event. Like there is going to be a deep faking scandal at some point. Like it's inevitable at this point. Like we've sort of had these like minor dust ups. It seems like I don't know how at this point we can avoid like a major scandal with deep faking. And the question is at this point, like what is that scandal going to look like, or what is that sort of crisis going to look like? And
what's the tipping point exactly? What's going to be where it goes from being just kind of like this fantastical thing that people panic about online, and they say already, I'm sure, like, you know, with any already like false flag narratives are so big whenever there's a shooting in America. And I've already seen plenty of stuff that's like, oh well, you know, all the victims were deep fakes, or the shooter was a deep fake, or this court footage is a deep fake, right? I mean, it's immediately like really it latches into the conspiracy part of your brain pretty easily. It slots in there neatly where it's just like, yes, of course, obviously this technology is much more powerful than we know, and it's being used to totally just paper over reality even more than it already has been, you know?
Yeah, I mean, there's absolutely no question that whatever sort of deep faking technology we're being exposed to through pornography and like sort of these other news stories which we'll get into later, like the whatever technology this is based on is improving, sold to people who like are willing to pay a lot of money for that, who, you know, is like intelligence agencies and governments.
And if you want to go even more conspiracy mind, it's like, well, the fact that, you know, the main, I'd say you really in most like pop media or whatever, you really only hear about it in relation to porn, in terms of like, a celebrity's face being real-time animated over pornography. So you have now videos, you have like fake celebrity video pornography, which is a step up from fake celebrity photo pornography, which is something that anyone who grew up on the internet is super familiar with.
Well acquainted with.
Yeah, but it's almost like it makes it seem like a little goofy and innocuous. That's kind of the main way most people encounter it. And that could just be that the technology isn't actually there yet. And then, or conversely, it's like full conspiracy brain is like, well, that's, you know, totally by design. So that when it does get good enough, or maybe it already is, people will only associate it as this goofy thing that's used to make, it's just for creeps and weirdos and freaks. And it's not, you know, the NSA and the CIA using it. Or even, as we're going to eventually talk about, you know, like politicians who are of advanced age, who might not be as photogenic as they used to be.
And this was like the thing, I guess, about a year ago, right? When Epstein was arrested?
Yes.
There, and you know, who knows what it was, but there was like a big sort of a renaissance of stories about deep faking after like we had sort of had this initial wave in, I guess, early 2018 is when I remember.
Yeah, I can't remember the date exactly,
stories
but that sounds
about
right.
pornography, where like suddenly it was like, oh, well, deep faking technology is really scary, and sort of the sort of conspiracy brain was like, well, of course, like they're planning these like stories about, you know, deep faking in advance of like potentially like scandalous materials being leaked, and obviously like those materials never emerged, and who knows why that was, or who knows why any of that was,
I remember this. I remember this, that it would be used as the excuse. So like when you saw a video of, you know, Bill Clinton having sex with an underage person or whatever, that would be the prediction was that then deepfakes would be used as the cover for that once all those things were released, right? Because again, everyone's also still waiting for the, you know, the dead man switch or whatever. that I think people predicted that Epstein had, and then that Ghislaine had, that when one of them was captured or imprisoned, then everything would be released, and we'd have it all.
And yeah, that's not quite come to pass the way a lot of people imagined or hoped.
Yeah,
I guess.
yeah.
But yeah, enough. I guess the sort of framework we want to work in today to look at this comes from this Brian Masumi
yes.
essay that I had read many years ago, and I have the book right here with me. It's the Everyday, what is it? The Politics of Everyday Fear, and it's a collection that he edited. It's very interesting. He writes the sort of introductory essay, which is what we're talking about today, but it's a really, really interesting collection. It's kind of like out of print and hard to find, but if you can like download it somewhere, you definitely should.
Yeah. When did it come out?
I believe this was like the early 90s. Let me
Okay. I mean, that would make sense because
Yeah,
a lot of the quotes are from the late 80s, and it's, the Vogue issue, I think, is from like 1990 that he references a lot.
And the reason this is so interesting because it is like the dawn of the internet when he's writing this, and like one of the things he reprints here is these sort of like chat logs from LibertyNet, which is like this sort of white nationalist message board. I don't know if they're still around in any form. I had definitely heard about them like growing up. They were still around when I was a teenager, but but yeah, basically like this is one of the things he prints in here. So it's like this dawn of the internet kind of like writing, but it's this really interesting collection that not only has like academic writing, but it has sort of like creative works. It has like a fragment of I believe, unfilmed screenplay by Todd Haynes. Maybe someone who's like better acquainted with Todd Haynes can tell me if
Very
it exists
cool.
somewhere. But like, yeah, it includes like Charles Manson's testimony, like an excerpt of like Hitler's writing, but sort of it's like this sort of like general overview of like what fear like in general, and sort of fear particularly like related to this sort of like post-industrial moment, post like Fordist kind of like capitalism, which is what this essay, which is titled "Everywhere You Want to Be: An Introduction to Fear," sort of picks off. And we have a couple of quotes we picked out from it that are on the screen with us right now. Let's see.
Yeah.
But basically, like I thought these were sort of good lead-ins to deepfakes in general. And basically, I think what's so interesting is he sort of begins with these advertisements, these Timex advertisements that are like, someone survived this incredible fall. They kept ticking, their Timex kept ticking. It's sort of like the like gist of the advertising. So it's this like an instance of like commercial advertising kind of like echoing this language of fear, where like this horrible thing is like has happened or will happen to you potentially. Like these ordinary people have sort of experienced these ordinary, extraordinary, horrifying circumstances, and so like it's this advertising that positions like consumption within like fear of bodily harm.
And also a way of staving off fear eventually. Sort of,
exactly.
right? Like it's the antidote is like you got to buy more shit.
Yeah, his eventual thesis is like that we're sort of in this perpetual stasis of like consumerism that sort of staves off fear and like renews like the like, I don't know, it's a very interesting essay, but I think the things that are so interesting about to me in this particular sense, where like he has a quote that fear is not fundamentally an emotion, it's the objectivity of the subjective underlying capitalism. And he goes on to say that fear is the translation into human terms and onto human scale of the double infinity of this sort of like atmosphere of fear. Like his sort of like his basic thesis is that like the late capitalism, post-Fordism, whatever, is like this state of fear that's either being like suspended or has like happened in this like general sense. Like the fear sort of like propels the whole system, and that occasionally we're able to sort of like wrestle with it and bring it down onto this human scale and sort of like begin to reckon with it there. So I thought it was this very interesting connection with like deep faking, where there is this like general anxiety that comes to meet like these sort of like technologically like based media projects, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's a super interesting essay, and I think it is one of those things where it's it's like very theoretical and also very creative and poetic and very well written, and a super in one of those ways where it's like it's not like I don't know, it's imaginative with the way that it kind of presents this theory, this very like broad large cultural theory about fear, and I'm sure the rest of the collection kind of bears that out. But I like reading it, and I like popping in and out of it too. It's definitely one of those. It's a good read for just kind of jumping in and finding little gems.
Big like headlines that sort of interrupt it constantly, like lists of names and events and things.
What's your read on that? On the names? I mean, obviously they're all figures that he mentions in one way or another, but the grouping of them is pretty interesting.
Right. Well, I think to some extent, like this sort of points to the second.
I can bring it up
that
too.
We picked out from this, the essay.
Yeah, just so we can see those blocks of the names being quoted.
Online for free.
Search up "Everywhere You Want to Be: An Introduction to Fear" by Brian Massumi.
But yeah, sort of like the other thing that he talks about is like fear is not only like this sort of omnipresent kind of like circumstance of everyday life, but it is like. But he talks about media's role in that sort of like atmosphere of fear, and what he theorizes is that and he's writing in like 1993, so it's like a different sort of mass media era, but he's writing about like this way in which like these specific events. So he references this sort of early example of like misogynistic like mass killings, which some people may be familiar with, but it's like
Montreal Polytechnic.
So basically there's this story where, and it's not a story, it really happened, but a man like walked into a college lecture with a gun, some sort of like rifle or something, and said, okay, all the men stand on this side of the room, all the women stand on this side, all the men, you need to leave. And the men left, and then he sort of proceeded to like murder all of the women on the other side of this room.
Well, vocally, like making reference to feminism, like specifically, which is the chilling part, and also what kind of the media latched onto.
Exactly, the explicitly anti-feminist sort of message. And so he argues that the media takes events like this event and other sort of similar events, and generalizes them, where there's this very specific tragedy that has occurred, and it becomes this sort of like malaise of fear and sort of anxiety, where like the next thing is always around the corner. There's no explanation for this, really. Like, why would a person do this? Like, these things are all like and he brings up other sort of like catastrophes, like the AIDS crisis, which was like fresh in the mind at the time, obviously, and just like global warming, global pandemic in general, which sort of makes this essay like weirdly kind of relevant again. That like this catastrophe is always sort of like looming around us, and it's so complicated and interconnected. There's no way to like get a handle on why it happened or how it happened or what it's going to do. But you know that you need to be afraid.
Yeah, this is the passage. I just totally by chance actually had that passage up about Polytechnique, the massacre. And yeah, I mean, it talks about, you know, the press spectacle of it, the madman theory, which actually I just, this reminds me of something that I read at the beginning of quarantine that definitely feeds into this idea where it is, you see this in the media's treatment of mass shootings, particularly, I think the Las Vegas shooting is a great example where there is seemingly zero motive, zero explanation now, like what, 2 years after it happens? Like I don't even, time just doesn't make sense anymore, but it's been a while.
Well, yeah.
And there was no narrative to grasp onto, so it's like there's this, it kind of falls into this weird void, and you know, this is like a example of that impulse that, you know, you don't get with Las Vegas, where you have to kind of like construct a theory out of the evidence that's presented to you, right? And you need to kind of like, it's very reductive. It's like this led to the shooting, right? And you kind of like take these little pieces together, and in this case it's like you know, yeah, they say the madman theory of the where you have his mugshot all over the place and everything, and that was kind of like, and this is, I guess, before this whole narrative, kind of everyone had the script for this type of narrative, but similar to Vegas, they Masumi talks about how there was the problem with this madman theory that everyone was propagating is that this dude was incredibly ordinary, outwardly so, like seeming, right? Like you would never pick him off the street to be like, oh, that guy's a danger to anyone, you know? And he's just kind of like a very unassuming, just like, yeah, just regular, I don't know, exactly, seemingly unextraordinary, which is an interesting assumption that someone has to be extraordinary in some way to commit an act like this, right? And I'm not sure where that impulse comes from, but
yeah, I mean, this is all part of it, is that like the thing he eventually builds towards is that the media has this like this paradoxical role where like things are examined endlessly, and like the media makes these objects of, or like these instances or these objects of like media attention like available forever. But at the same time, like it contributes to this general atmosphere of like this is just how things are, like, or whatever. It's this sort of like background noise, right? It's like background radiation. Like it's just sort of present, and I think the Las Vegas shooter is an incredible example of this, because there's no explanation for that event that anyone, or that has been like officially proffered. Obviously there's plenty of like conspiracy. Yeah,
well, it's there's only conspiracy at this point.
Well, yeah, exactly, because
it's like completely just,
the official line is that like this is just some guy who did this thing, and that's it. It's just this sort of like generalized fear. Like there is no specific reason that Stephen Paddock carried out this crime.
Yeah, and it's in the absence of being able to kind of like do point A to point B to point C and say, here's the reason that it happened, you know. There's just no conversation to even be had, which is so strange that it's like...
Oh, Michael?
Yeah?
Is it possible to turn me up?
Yeah, absolutely.
Ali says I'm very quiet.
Sorry, I had the levels up. And I'll boost it. There, you should be good.
Alright, is this better, Ali?
Yeah.
Sorry to interrupt.
No, it's okay. It's just, I don't know, I guess as long as we're talking about media, yeah, it is the kind of I think especially with something like a 24-hour news cycle, and these are not new problems, right? This is something that people have been suffering through for a long time, but when you have to constantly get to the next thing, it leaves no room for any sort of analysis or in-depth investigation of anything, right? So something has to have an instantly grab ontoable explanation, or else it's just as like it might as well not exist.
Yeah, exactly. It's either part of like a particular agenda or it's just
Yeah.
noise.
Yeah, exactly. It either fits into the current narrative in some way, whatever that may be, whatever political inclination that may be. I'm not saying that it's specific to anyone, orientation or whatever, but yeah, if it doesn't fit kind of into a slot where it can be instrumentalized, it's just like gone. Yeah.
No, exactly. And I think this is why I think this essay makes sense in terms of like talking about deepfaking,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like basically what we have with deepfaking is a sort of idea of a crisis. It's something that only can like exist in these various discussions of like, pornography crises, of sort of like people being placed into pornography against their will,
Mm-hmm.
or these sort of like imagined scenarios of like political crises. Like I remember for a while, I haven't been on the Reddit conspiracy board for a long time actually.
Mm.
But I remember for a while, it seemed like every month or two, there'd be people reposting sort of like the same or similar footage of someone like imitating, like doing like a real-time sort of deepfake of like Obama or something. Like some famous
Yes,
politician.
I remember that. I remember the Obama deepfakes. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's sort of this like imagined crisis. And so I think this was maybe a good place to tie in like the sort of recent real life example of this, which is, I think, the closest we've come to seeing what like a deepfake crisis like really looks like in real time.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think you're a little more familiar with the Oliver Taylor thing than I am, but let me know if you want me to give it a go.
Sorry, I have this video up right now. Yeah, this is the Obama deepfake video, which you won't believe. Is this the deepfake video? Yeah, it must be. Yeah, it's and it has kind of a the tip off still is that it always feels kind of like deepfake videos. The faces always look a little laggy, like a video game's like lagging behind a little bit, and it's like everything's not getting rendered all at once. Yeah, or it almost seems like the features slide around a little bit on the face, right? They're not completely fixed physically. Yeah, so they're a little loose. Yeah, let's go. So Oliver Taylor, though, then I guess is an example of an actual non-pornographic application, where you have this story, and this is in Reuters, about when was this even published? July 15th, so it's fairly recently.
Yeah, very, very recent.
So the story begins, Oliver Taylor, a student at England's University of Birmingham, is a 20-something with brown eyes, light stubble, and a slightly stiff smile. Online profiles describe him as a coffee lover and politics junkie who was raised in a traditional Jewish home. His half-dozen freelance editorials and blog posts reveal an active interest in anti-Semitism and Jewish affairs, with bylines in the Jerusalem Post and the Times of Israel. The catch, Oliver Taylor seems to be an elaborate fiction. So this whole story is about this English university student, Oliver Taylor, who has some sort of a digital media career, very low level, kind of mostly blog posts, writing opinion pieces for small publications. He wrote for 2 newspapers, according to this story. And his profile photo, according to this story on Reuters, is a hyper-realistic forgery, a, quote, deepfake. So it's unclear who's behind it, but Oliver Taylor's main activities have involved the kind of active harassment of Palestinian activists, basically. It's a very kind of loaded topic to talk about in a lot of ways.
Yeah, I mean, we don't need to get too into like who might have done this.
Yes, yeah. If this is, I mean, this could be this. It's the type of thing that could easily be the work of like a very, very, very passionate American like pro-Israel, just like not even a Jewish person, just someone who's like, yes, this is my fight, this is my like digital battleground, you know. But of course there are people who think
Right.
like, well, maybe it's like an Israeli intelligence operation, maybe it's an experimentation of techniques that could be used in the future.
Yeah, totally. And I think the other sort of curious thing about this is that it uses deepfake in a different sort of sense than we
Yes.
usually hear it, right?
Yeah.
And I think what's so sort of like telling about this story is that like deep faking has these other sorts of like technologies attached to it, or like these other sort of applications attached to it besides like this sort of one-to-one, like real time, like my face on your face kind of thing. Like, yeah, this is a completely like digitally constructed person, someone whose image doesn't seem to exist anywhere else. I mean, I'm also really curious about this story. Like, how do they know that this person is a deep fake? I mean, I don't know. The more I think about this, like the more my conspiracy brain's kind of like kicking into overdrive, because like why is, so they can't find this guy online and they see a picture of this guy attached to these bylines, like who's in what universe is that a deep fake? Like this Reuters article is so vague and it's all we have. It's very confusing.
Yeah, it's it is kind of like, it seems like it's Reuters developing their own language and idea of what a deep fake is and using it to mean more a constructed fictional digital identity, which is not anything new and certainly not dependent on, deep fake video technology, which is fairly new. But it seems to be, it has this, I think what might make it a deep fake is if, say, for instance, this profile photo that's featured here, which, again, one of these heat maps that I've seen a lot when talking about doctored images, I think they're, like, largely complete bullshit, would be my guess.
Yeah.
I think it's just kind of, like, a pretty thing to, like, put in stories about this stuff. But, I think it would enter the realm of deepfake if, say, this image were completely constructed out of thin air. If it wasn't just like a simple Photoshop or a simple distortion. If this was like a completely generated face so that it couldn't even be recognized by facial recognition, like that's where I think it starts to move into the realm of a deepfake.
Yeah, it's just a baffling kind of story overall, right?
Yeah.
But this is sort of also the closest we've had to like a real deepfake like crisis, like where some harm has been done, allegedly, because of a deepfake, or because of a supposed deepfake.
Yeah, and I think it's an interesting article, and I think definitely like to go into it further, it'd be interesting to do research about the people involved a little bit too, because it's like, it says Reuters was alerted to Taylor by London academic Mazen Masri, who drew international attention in late 2018 when he helped launch an Israeli lawsuit against the surveillance company NSO on behalf of alleged Mexican victims of the company's phone hacking technology. So that paragraph alone is so loaded with, like, I think potential motives for why this story exists, potential maybe, it's being presented as perhaps a tool of Israeli propaganda, like Israeli state propaganda. But, then you have this academic in London who is apparently the source for this story, or the person who brought Taylor to attention of the journalist. So it's like, maybe it originated there. Maybe it's like, like a double propaganda thing, right? Where it's like, expressly made to kind of juice up the boogeyman of like scary, covert Israeli intelligence. Kind of has their fingers everywhere,
No, totally. Yeah, it's who knows what this is. The article is like very suspicious for how sparse it is in terms of like actual details, but but at the same time, regardless of whether this is what sort of motivation you're attributing to Reuters, and sort of all the other outlets that picked this up. I know like The Verge did something about this based on this Reuters article.
Yeah.
There have been several other like write-ups. Like this is like the closest thing we have. This is some sort of prediction of what a larger like deepfake scandal looks like. Right?
Yeah, and it basically this scandal here boils down to the fact that Taylor, the supposed invented the deepfake journalist, wrote an article in a U.S. Jewish newspaper.
Yeah.
Accusing this Professor Masri and his wife Rivka Barnard of being known terrorist sympathizers. So
I'm so
typical
too,
like stock slander of Palestinian activists.
Well, yeah, it's so strange, and you have to wonder like what the usage of deepfake is doing here, because like why if the sorry I'm like I'm like sort of like in full like conspiracy.
Yeah,
right
please.
now.
No, I mean it is a weird story. I think this is why we wanted to talk about it.
But like, why on earth is the story that? So if the sort of like implied story in this Reuters article is that it's like an Israeli intelligence operation, basically, or some sort of Israel specific like sympathetic type of like organization that's made this fake profile, like, yeah, I don't know, like what why does it need to be like this? Why is it like I'm having trouble articulating even what I'm trying to say, but like,
why go through all the work?
Yeah, why deepfake an imaginary person for this? Like, it doesn't make any sense.
Yeah. I mean, the only thing that I can think of is just like a proof of concept, is that you're kind of testing the waters for the efficacy of this type of approach. But yeah, no, you're right that it definitely raises a lot of alarm bells, especially when it's
how did this couple, like this academic couple who are, I guess, like I don't know what their fields are, but I don't think they're like tech people. Like, why do they think this was a deep fake? Like,
I mean, and why would
the story come from?
In what realm do you like? Just I mean, again, so we don't know who they are, right? They could have like media connections. They could know journalists and things like that. But it's like someone. I mean, it is obviously it's inflammatory that someone writes an article about you calling you a terrorist sympathizer.
Yeah, of
like
course.
That's not ideal. But then to
Really
have
meant to provoke.
but then to have something like that written about you, and then to take it to a news organization to have it like create this type of investigation that comes to this conclusion, it is a lot of kind of like once you start picking it apart, it's a lot of like leaps, really.
Well, I mean, it's such a brief article too. This article, which is the source for all these sort of like spin-off articles.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I haven't read a lot of those other articles. I really just read the Reuters article.
Yeah, I mean, but I think it's the typical modern media thing of like, it's just rehashing. It's
maybe
like
other places did additional investigation that's more compelling.
Yeah, it's like so much journalism now is just like basically like TV recaps.
Yeah, totally.
But yeah,
I mean, it's weird. Like, clearly this person doesn't exist.
Yeah.
But I guess I mean, we had to bring this up, of course, in any discussion of deepfakes right now, because this is like the deepfake news story, and like, me like not really keeping up with this kind of shit like that actively. This had come to my attention before you sent it to me. Like, I had heard about it, and I'm really sort of like, for the last couple of months, I've been really out of the loop on like conspiracy stuff and like, weird tech stuff in a way. So this is everywhere.
No, and it's.
But I guess, do we want to show the Joe Biden footage?
Yeah, should we move right into that? Is there?
Well, yeah, because I mean, I think this is like the connection for me, and like thinking about these things together is like, we just had this DNC last weekend, the Democratic National Convention, and there's all sorts of strange footage that emerges from that convention, but like
the Tim and Eric convention, basically.
But like
it's truly bizarre.
Sort of like the awkwardness of hosting an event, like virtually, plus like Joe Biden's own apparently sort of like failing like mental faculties.
Yeah, he's old.
Yeah, he's an
He's
old
just
man,
old as fuck.
and it's like he doesn't go out in public much, and that's sort of been the whole strategy of his campaign is to
Yeah.
sort of be out of the public eye as much as possible.
Yeah.
And you know, I'm not alleging anything. Obviously, like but there's this footage that's very surreal that I think we should show.
Yeah.
And I'm not alleging this is a deep fake. I don't think it is, based on anything I know about deep fakes. But like, it has sort of occurred to me, like watching this stuff like come out of this sort of fake press conference or this fake convention where there's nobody there.
Mm-hmm.
Like, now is the time to like be deep faking a politician.
Yeah, no, absolutely true.
Like,
it is. If the only kind of if the only barrier for convincing the public that you're real is the fact that you appear on a live video feed, the burden of truth becomes a lot smaller, a lot lighter.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
And yeah, so we can just have this running maybe a little bit.
Yeah, I'll let it rip, but definitely, and I mean,
the
this
sound
shot
is
in
not super
particular
important.
looks like it looks two-dimensional right there, you know?
Yeah, no, it's incredibly uncanny, regardless of what else is going on.
Yeah. The clapping crowds and it could even be a thing of like, again, if you, and I know this is, something that we like indulging in, but like full conspiracy mode is like, yeah, he's there. And he's, he could even be reading off the teleprompter and they've just cut the audio feed and, put an overlay of like a pre-rendered Joe over his face or something. Like, who knows,
No, totally, yeah. I mean, there's all sorts of possibilities. Like, I think once you entertain the realm of, like, deepfake conspiracy, like, a candidate like Joe Biden is someone who, I think has a hard time sort of like formulating like coherent thought. Like he's sort of a prime target for like a little like push across the finish line.
Exactly. A little dressing up. I mean, I've seen the joke like plenty of times that he's only out in public after he's been like shot up with amphetamines or something like. And that's why he goes out so rarely because you can only take so much of that. But yeah, he gets a nice kick, and then they go have him like drive a sports car or whatever he was doing.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, no, I mean like this footage in particular is so surreal for any number of reasons, like the very real sort of catastrophe of like the pandemic, which has sort of like shut things down so thoroughly.
And necessitated this totally virtual convention again, where it's these people are just I don't even know like what is behind the stage too. I would love to see what this whole studio actually looked like. But you just have these 4 candidates. It's 4 people. It's 2 candidates and their spouses, and they're just waving at a video screen of monitors.
No, it's incredibly strange. Yeah, the people aren't there. He isn't there in any real sense. Like he's somewhere. He's just somewhere. It could be anywhere.
Yeah, could be anywhere.
So I mean, but I don't know. That was my thinking with this. I don't really have much follow up with that other than.
Yeah, I just think that's the obvious place where your imagination goes with this stuff.
But like, yeah, it's like if we're talking about this completely virtual setup that he has going here, like. And if we can assume, I think safely, that like deep faking technology is well advanced of whatever sort of technology is being like made like commercially available to make fake pornography. Like I think at the very least, like that's not a controversial statement.
Yeah.
There's some other technology there. Like, this is not the moment like where you have to have these sort of virtual rallies, at least for like sort of national figures like Joe Biden, like where you can't get around like a town, like there's no sort of safe way to do like the Democratic National Convention. Like you need to have a remote because of COVID-19.
Yeah.
Like is this not the perfect moment for them to test out this technology? And again, there is no reason to like really assume that this footage we're showing is deep fake. But like this is all I meant to bring this up as one avenue of like what a possible sort of like deep fake crisis looks like, because I think the last sort of like media text we really had thought about this week was and I'll just reference it really like obliquely, is this Philip K. Dick short story called The Second Variety, which is sort of like a Cold War era story that he wrote. I mean, obviously everything he wrote is like Cold War era, but it's like this particularly like speaking to a Cold War mindset of in this story, but it's about a group of sort of humans who have survived this sort of vast nuclear fallout. And this is what the new Battlestar Galactica is based on, if you've seen that. So it should be familiar. But like basically these people, they have these robots that were meant to eliminate people, and they're these sort of like hordes of robots that are roaming the earth, killing people. And they come to find out after it's too late that the robots have manufactured themselves to look like humans and are now killing humans and sort of supplanting them. And the only connection here is, I think we were talking about Philip K. Dick a while ago, which is why I went back and looked at this. But I think the deepfake crisis, when it sort of comes to a head, is going to be like really wide sweeping. If and when we have like a true deepfake crisis, it's going to be a situation where we're going to learn retroactively that it was a lot more sort of pronounced and omnipresent than anything you could have imagined. That I think you're right. I mean, again, it's the Cylons are in your midst. You know? And it's like, how many Oliver Taylors might there be out there, right? That are totally. That could, again, and even if it's just like a proof of concept thing, right? Like, how many could there be that aren't, writing really inflammatory articles about Palestinian rights activists? I mean, how many could there be that are just like, churning out just totally boilerplate, like pro-school privatization articles or anti-union thing, or just like any sort of narrative that needs to be advanced, right? It's like one step up from, the like bot networks and things like that, which I know people like it's all of that stuff is very kind of caught up in Russiagate stuff, which I'm not, a big fan of in particular, but it is like undeniably something that does happen, whether it's done by whatever country is doing it. But there are these kind of like, propaganda operations that happen on social media that are meant to look organic, and they're not. It's the same thing as astroturfing, right? The idea of making like a manufactured political movement that looks really organic and is actually totally funded by the, top down from the political machine. But I think you're right that there could be very innocuous forms of this out there that are just kind of testing the waters, and that we wouldn't even know about. I mean, that we might never know about, and that if we do know about, would only be because of some larger catastrophe, kind of like, really reveals the extent of the problem. And that's sort of the thing is, and to sort of bring it back to Masumi a little bit in this sort of environment of fear, like it is this like omnipresent anxiety, right?
Yeah.
Like once you sort of begin to think about this stuff, like, it is completely feasible or like plausible that this technology really doesn't get like trotted out for that much. Like the sort of thinking behind this is not that creative.
It could be a total pipe dream, exactly. And you can never underestimate people's like lack of creativity when it comes to using
but it is like
powerful, scary technology.
Sort of like, I mean, like, what's the difference between Oliver Taylor? Yeah, like you were saying, the difference between Oliver Taylor and any other like astroturfing account is that he has this picture that, I don't know what kind of like forensics Reuters has on its like staff, like can't be traced to any real person. I don't know where the deepfake hypothesis comes from, but like, I guess trust them to like believe that this is not, a picture of a real person.
Yeah, according to
It's
Tel Aviv-based deepfake detection company Ciabra. So that's their source. But what does
very
that even mean?
interesting.
A deepfake detection
Yeah.
company? I mean, we should just look up what their deal is and cover
Yeah.
that more. But yeah, it could be. It's also like, and to go back to like the lack of creativity thing that I said, it's like, we are also at a time in whatever you want to call it, like late stage capitalism, post Fordism. Like we're in this time where things are so thoroughly kind of financialized that it could, like, this technology could be like incredibly powerful and incredibly good at tricking people into believing that a person is real when they're not, and it could be used for nothing more than just selling shit. It could be used
Yeah,
for selling
totally.
Cheez-Its or fucking detergent or just any bullshit
Totally.
like that. It's so, I mean, again, it's kind of like Masumi's fear reminds me of that Mark Fisher's capitalist realism, and a big part of that is kind of the death of imagination that comes with when you are in a time when really everything, if it has any kind of like has any sort of potential or any sort of ingenuity, just gets totally subsumed back into the market and into marketing and into just commercialization, right? It's like it's either
Yeah.
military industrial complex or selling shit slightly better than we sold shit, 6 months ago.
No, exactly. We're kind of in a situation where we know this deep faking technology exists. We know it's more advanced than what's being used to make like deep fakes of like celebrities in pornographic videos.
Yeah.
And the question is like whether the sort of crisis is everywhere or nowhere.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, totally.
And like, and yeah, and it's sort of like has become this like in particularly like conspiracy circles has become this like emblem of like this like technological like imposition, where I think about the last great tech scandal being like sort of like Edward Snowden and those revelations.
Yeah.
Like the last like really like truly revelatory kind of experience with like learning about how technology is used.
I think Cambridge Analytica too is pretty up there at this point.
Yeah, I guess
but yeah,
that's true.
also,
True.
but they're all, one is it's downstream of that. Like they're all kind of
Yeah, I guess that's what I mean. I guess
feeding into each other. It's
But,
just
like-
increasing more and more revelations about the monitoring of individuals, basically, right?
monitoring of individuals, but also sort of whatever the mainstream sort of media politics, like whatever sort of like governing body of like discourse
Yeah.
being able to like impose things on people rather. I think about like the NSA and Snowden revelations being this sort of realization that we had sort of entered the system.
Yes.
But, I think a lot of people saw it coming at that point. Like a lot of people who were tech savvy. And my dad was a computer
I was gonna
programmer,
say, yeah, your dad was
and
way ahead of
basically
that.
and basically said like, hey, like like nothing you do online is private, like, and like. So the idea of this being a revelation is in some ways like strange to me, because that's what I grew up with. But like it's like this consumer product that we learned was doing something that it wasn't, and deepfakes seem to represent this possibility for like an imposition of like this sort of like false reality or something. Right?
Yeah, and reinforcing it more, where it's like with Snowden and NSA monitoring, and then Cambridge Analytica, which it's you have those two sides then right there, with like you have NSA is the state doing this invasive monitoring, Cambridge Analytica is the forces of the market, basically, or this monitoring being done for selling shit in fucking Facebook ads or whatever. Obviously, the main focus was on like political ads and things like that, but come on, I mean, this stuff was probably mainly being used for
totally
products, for selling shit. And so you have those two sides with those two events, and I think deepfakes is just it's kind of and it goes to that level beyond where it's totally, again, it's totally undermining, like those undermined your faith in institutions and your faith in technology. And then with deepfakes, now that that faith has been totally undermined, it kind of like, it invades that space that's been created by the doubt, and it's just like kind of resides there, right? Because it is something that is, it's an uncanny thing. It's not immediately apparent, right? So it, you know, the more you think about it, the more it doesn't lead you any closer to any sort of certainty. It just leads you more into mania, because it just makes you kind of see
No,
deepfakes
exactly.
everywhere.
Exactly, and yeah, and this is why sort of the introduction to fear is perfect, because
Yeah.
it is like it's everywhere and nowhere. Like the deep fake is both like emerges in these incredible like specific instances of scandal, either through pornography or like this Oliver Taylor like false person journalist kind of story, or you know, it's nowhere. It's like this generality. It's this idea of something that needs to be feared.
Yeah. Yeah, and ultimately, to go back to conspiracy stuff,
Yeah,
I have read. There's some fun ones out there about Edward Snowden being a artificial, a non-existent person.
Yeah, Mr.
A
Deepfake.
created entity, basically. Yeah, a deep fake, and it's all just, you know, it's the it's a limited hangout, you know. It's just like giving you a little bit, so you don't dig for the real stuff.
Yeah, totally. That's it.
Should we end on that? Edward Snowden
Yeah, why
isn't
not?
real.
That's it. Like, yeah, conspiracy galaxy brain. Why not?
Oh yeah,
It's
cool.
as good a place as any.
Yeah, well, that was fun. We'll pick up where we left off next Tuesday.
Yeah, why not?
Sound good?
Perfect.
All right. See you later.
All right. Bye-bye, everyone.
Bye.